Hey guys, in this quick tutorial I will be teaching you how FormlyLogic works, and we will be building this quick example that I've designed on Figma on Webflow using FormlyLogic. I will also be going through the documentation as well as the core concept of FormlyLogic and how it all works and what you need to know before you start building. So first of all, once you sign up, you should have access to the FormlyLogic docs, which is available in your dashboard. So head over to your dashboard and you should see FormlyLogic there. Go to the docs, and this is a separate doc that is not available to the free users. This is only for pro users. And yeah, so I will be just explaining what are the terminology that I'll be using. So first of all, a step, whenever I say a form step, it is the element with the attribute data form equals step. Step wrapper is the element that's right inside of that step. Again, all of this will be very clear once we start looking at it on Webflow. And then when I say form element, I mean the element that has the data form equals multistep attribute. These are the three sort of words that I will be using often, so just gives you a heads up on that. And then in terms of the concept, the way FormlyLogic works is that with logic, the user is still going to the next step, but they are seeing a different step wrapper. So if you look at this example over here, every time the user goes to the next step or clicks next or progresses through the form, you are still progressing down this chain where it goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. But based on which option you have clicked, you see this div block or this div block. Again, that's the overview of how FormlyLogic works. Again, this will be super easy when you see it in action, but in terms of its capacity, there's also ability to skip steps. So let's say you want to have a third option. When you click on it, it skips all the way to the final step. We can do that, which again I'll cover in this quick video. But just study this diagram. It should give you a very good idea. So each of this gray block, the big one with the border, is a form step. And then inside each form step, you will have a step wrapper, and that corresponds to the option that you've clicked. So if you click on option 1, you still go to the next step, but you do not see this div block here. Instead, you only see this div block that is corresponding to the option that you clicked. So with that said, I think that should give you a very good idea. And let's start building it on Webflow. So here I have just the structure of one of the step on Webflow already set up just to help make this quick, but I have not added any of the attributes. So the first attribute with any Formly form is that to add the data form equals multistep attribute to your form block. So this now enables Formly in this form element over here. And then because you want to add logic, you have to add this attribute data logic extra equals true to enable logic in your form. So I'm just going to do that. Now, those are the two core attributes that you need to add. And then there are two more attributes that are specially for FormlyLogic. The first one is a go-to attribute. What this means is that this is the attribute that you add to your radio button or your div block, and it's almost like the branch that's reaching on to the next step. So if you were to look at it at this point, when you want to connect this radio button to this div block, you have to connect it with something, right? And that's the attribute data go to. So it's sort of like reaching out to the next step in your form. And the second attribute is the data answer attribute, where it goes to the next step, but you need to tell the code which one of the div that you want to see, and that's the answer. So data go to, you add it to your radio, and data answer, you add it to the div block, and the value has to be the same. So this give branch name should be the same. So for example, here I give data go to equals A. In the next step, it should be data answer equals A. So let's start building up. So here we have the first form item. So let's add data form equals step. So that's your step 1. And now I'm just gonna count how many steps we have here. So we have step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. So we have 4 individual steps, and I'm just gonna duplicate it 3 more times. and I'm gonna call this, so all of this has the step attribute. So that is it, that's done. I'm just gonna quickly go in and remove the, I'm just gonna head back up, and we have to add the attribute for your back button. So data form equals back dash btn. So again, these are all the basic attributes from the normal Formly form, like a multi-step form. So data form equals next dash btn. Cool. Now you should see we have all the basic multi-step attributes, and now we can start building logic. So again, I'm going to go in and duplicate it 3 more times, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove the radio buttons just so that it's like this. Cool. So when I click, so here, let's say the first question is, what services are you looking for? Option 1, let's call it design only, and option 2, let's call it Webflow development. And based on which one the user selects, the user will see a different, will go down a different logic path. All right. So to this radio button, we add data go to design, and then to this radio button, we should add data go to Webflow. Cool. And then there's one more attribute that I need to remember, is that to every first step wrapper, you need to add this data answer equals empty attribute. So why do you need to add this is that attribute basically runs validation on your forms. So if you have any other input like a text block or a checkbox or an email input, you want that to be validated, right? So this attribute data answer actually runs the validation in that step. But because this is the first step, we do not have anything above for it to connect. So we just leave it as empty. So data answer equals, just leave it as empty on your very first step wrapper. Cool. Now in your second step wrapper, let's call this, I'm going to remove A. I'm going to call this design. So this design branch, just very obvious, that's the design branch. Add a heading in there. And let's, oops, why is this? That's very weird. Okay, yeah, there you go. So, and I'm gonna call it, so what is the question we have? How many pages? So how many pages? And then we will need to have another step wrapper for your Webflow branch, right? So if users select Webflow, you want them to see this branch and not this branch. So here, let's ask, do you have a Figma file? So we're going to have another logic break. Okay, so do you have a Figma file? And then that one, we will just ask a yes, no question. So, and we'll have a logic added to that as well. So yes, no, cool. So now we have this data go to design. We need to add a data answer equals design. So what we do is, to this step wrapper, we add data answer equals design. So what essentially has happened is we have connected this radio button to this div block, and we haven't yet connected this radio button to this div block. So I'm just going to go ahead and publish this prematurely, and you should see that whenever I click design only, you should see this div block. When I click on development, you will see a blank page. And that's a very common bug that we always get. And that's, whenever you see that, it always means that you have not added the attributes correctly. So here I'm clicking on design only, and you see I see both because I have not given the attribute to this div block. But if I go back and I select Webflow development, okay, so cool. It's an unintentionally, it is working unintentionally, but if I were to give it data answer, let's say I misspell it. Instead of Webflow, I put in WordPress. Ew, what a blasphemy. But now if I click on that, you should not see anything else on the next page. So when I click on design only, you should see this. And when I go back, when I click on Webflow, you do not see anything. And that's a very, very common bug. And that's because this data go to value and your data answer value are not the same. So it still goes to the next step, but you will not see anything being rendered inside because both of these div blocks are hidden. I hope that made sense. So let's change this to Webflow, and I'm going to go ahead and publish that. So when you see this, when I go back to the page and I refresh it, when I click on Webflow, you should see that this div block now shows. When I go back and click on design, you see a different div block. So you're still going to the next step, but you're seeing a different div block based on what option you just clicked on. I hope so far that made sense. And now let's continue down our design. Sorry. Cool. So in my next step, I want a budget div, and there's a logic here where if I select yes, I go to the next step and give a Figma link. But if I select no, I'm not going to step 3. I'm actually going straight down to step 4. I'm skipping step 3, and we'll see how that's done. Cool. So now, how many pages? Let's add in an input just in case over here, and you can use, and let's make sure that's required. So you will see validation will now work. Cool. So now from this step, I want to go to the next step, which is the budget, right? So I am just going to copy this heading over here. I'm just going to paste it in there, and I'm still going to call this design. So it's clear we are still in the design branch, and I'm going to call it what's your budget, and I'm just going to copy this input block and paste it in here. Cool. And then I'm just going to duplicate that step wrapper for the Figma file, right? So cool. So now let's connect this div block over here to this div block over here. So to this here, we add data go to, and let's call it budget. And then to this one, we add data answer equals budget. So now you have connected this to this. So let me prematurely publish this just so that I can show you that branch is working. So let's go here, give it a refresh. If I go to design only, see now I can't go to the next step until I type something in. So your validation also works. And I go next, and I can see what's your budget, and I see it twice because I've duplicated it. But yeah, so it's still going to the next step. So let me link up the second one. So here we have two options. So one, do you have a Figma file? So I'm just going to call this Webflow again, and I'm going to ask them for please share your Figma design, and they have to put in a link over here, so that's fine. And then I have to connect this step to the next. So when the user clicks on yes, I want them to go to Figma, and I just call this step data answer equals Figma suite. So now we have connected this div block over here, how many pages, to this, what's your budget, and we have also connected, do you have a Figma file? Yes, to this one over here. We haven't yet gone to the no, so we'll get that towards the end, but I'm just gonna again prematurely publish this just to show you how it's all working. So let's go here, design only. I put in some text, and I put in my budget, and that should go to the next step. So that's good. So now let's go back, and I go to Webflow development. I select yes, I put in my Figma link, and I go next. Perfect. That's working. That's working exactly how we do. But now if I go back and say no, I don't see anything, and that's because there is no data answer attribute that's connected to this to this video button. So let's get back to that in a bit, because that is going to be a skip attribute, which I'll get to shortly. But let's finish up this. So now we have all the answers that we need. So we got the pages, we got the Figma design, yes, Figma link, and now they all merge back into the final step, which is a basic contact form. And again, you can merge this step any part of your form. You can branch out, maybe if they select no, you can have a different branch. You can ask more questions. You have complete freedom to do so. but this is just showing you how you would build a very basic form. So now here I'm just going to copy this heading over here. I am just going to call this step final step, just so that you can see it actually working. And I'm going to say now, okay, let's say, just keep it simple, contact details, and my spelling is terrible, details. Cool. And I'm just gonna copy this one. I'm just gonna duplicate it a few times just to mimic some, and I'm gonna show you that you have to make sure your email inputs are also validated. So I'm just gonna call it, so I'm just gonna add that in. Cool. So now, and then we will remove this next button, and let's add in a form submit form button over here. And to this, we add the basic data form equals submit. Great. So now we have a submit button. Now let's style it nicely. So I'm just going to copy the style over here. Perfect. Now, now we just need to connect this step with the rest of the last two. So here we have data answer equals budget. Now you want it to go to data, and I'm just going to call this final. And again, repeat the same thing. So data go to final. So now these two div blocks have the same go to attribute, meaning both of them will merge into this div with the attribute data answer equals final. Sweet. So now we have the full branch set up. Let's again give that a publish and see it live. And we still haven't accounted for the no option, which when you click on this, it should skip me right to the final step. So let me refresh this page just to show you the whole thing works. So how many pages, what's your budget, contact details, everything all works. And I can't submit because I haven't added the email form. Perfect. Now I'm just going to go back all the way, select Webflow development. Yes, I have a Figma file. Here's my Figma file. Perfect. So you have the contact details as well. Great. Now let's go back, and how do you skip? How do you skip from step 2 to step 4? Perfect. This is super easy. All you need to do is add this attribute data skip to, and hear me out here. This value is basically the step number. So for example, how do you determine what step number is this final step? You just need to count how many step items do you have. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to skip to step 4. All I need to do is skip to step 4. That's it. Now, if I publish this, it should skip me to step 4. Now let's give that a publish. I'm just going to go through that branch, Webflow development. No. See, now you don't see anything, and that's not because we have missed something. We just have to account for something else, which is the data go to attribute. So it's going to, so what happened there is it is going to step 4, but there is no, it's not connected to the data answer attribute. So just to fix that, you have to do is data, here there is an attribute called data go to Webflow. So what it's doing is it is going to step 4 and it's looking for data answer equals Webflow, but it's not Webflow, it's final, right? So all we need to do is go back and change that to final, and you should see that working. And what happens if you don't have a go to attribute? It will still work. Let me show you this first. So let's move to development, no Figma file, and you skipped right to the last step. So what happens when you don't have the data go to final attribute? It will still work, and that's useful if your final step has only one step wrapper. So what do I mean by that? So let's see if that works. I'm gonna go to Webflow development, no, and I go next. Yeah, so sorry, that actually doesn't work. Yeah, sorry, that doesn't work, and that's because this final step actually has data answer attribute. So ignore me. I was thinking of an edge case where you don't need it, but it's always good practice to add data go to final. And why we recommend doing that is because if, let's say, you have a final step, let's say you have two different versions of it. So, and I can call this final 2. So why would you have this? So for example, let's say a design client, maybe you want to get more information. Maybe you want to get their phone number or something like that. You can have a separate final step, and you can make them go to final step 2. So for example, okay, let's say this one goes to final step 2, and you also want, when they select no, to go to final step 2. This is why this is useful, is that you can have final control on where you're skipping to in your next step. So let me refresh this and show you what I mean. So if I select Webflow and I select yes, and I put in something, I see final step 2, and I go back. Let me just refresh this, it's easier. And I click on design and I go down this path, I see step final. I don't see the step final 2. And that's the same when I click on Webflow development. When I say no, you are skipping to the 4th step, but instead of seeing both of your final step, you're seeing only one.